Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, and today I'm here to talk about what I believe in short time will be the first season of a new Argentinian apocalyptic sci-fi series on Netflix entitled The Eternaut. First off, I want to say how much I hate that title. I hate it because I can't pronounce it, because I can't figure out like where the proper inflection points are. Like, is it Eternaut? Is it Eternaut? I don't know, but as I'm prone to do, I did look up the term. And I can't find a pronunciation because it's a made-up word specifically for the graphic novel series that this show is based on. It's a portmanteau of the word eternal, obviously meaning like everlasting, and obviously astronaut, essentially meaning space traveler. I think I'm going to go with Eternaut. I don't know, Eternaut? Eternaut sounds like it has eternal in it, though. Like eternal, but Eternaut. Maybe I'll go with Eternaut. I don't know. I'll see. I'm starting the video. I have no idea how I'm going to pronounce the name of this show. Maybe I won't have to say it anymore. Anyway, the reason that I said I expected it will soon be the first season because a second season hasn't been officially announced yet. But I think one of, if not the best thing that this first season, these first 6 episodes did was set up a second season. So like, and the show is fairly popular. It's getting really good reviews. I think a second season is coming. So I didn't want to say season 1 because that's not official, but this is probably season 1 of at minimum 2. An argument could be made that this entire 6-episode first season was set up for the story that they want to tell in subsequent seasons. We just needed this season to kind of like build the world first. So let's start talking about the show and the world that it built. So the show throws you into a post-apocalyptic world where a massive EMP has knocked out all of electricity. At least that's what EMP is, what it is assumed to be. On top of that, some deadly toxic snow is falling from the sky and it kills anyone it touches on impact. It's got survival, it being the show. It's got survival, it's got mystery, it's got aliens, it's got giant beetle spider hybrids. It's doing a lot, but is it worth the hype? Because there's a lot of that going around right now. It's pretty popular. So let's talk about it to find out. So the story kicks off with a group of friends playing cards in a basement when everything hits the fan. Immediately, while trying to figure out what's going on, they lose a friend who stubbornly goes out into the toxic snow because seeing bodies in the street wasn't convincing enough for him. He has to be sure, and he permanently gets his answer when he goes outside and is killed. The remaining crew is trying to make sense of all the chaos, and they want to reach an island owned by one of the members of the group named Tano, who looks like a combination of Super Mario and if Pedro Pascal let himself go. Also, his actual name is Alfredo Favalli, so I don't know where Tano comes from, but if there's any Argentines watching that can fill me in, maybe Tano's a popular nickname or it's an insult or something, I don't know, feel free to enlighten me. So the main character, his name is Juan Salvo. Him and Tano are BFFs. After the toxic snow hits and everyone understands the severity of it, Juan's focus turns to searching for his daughter, Clara. And they being the characters and the show, a substantial amount of time searching for Clara. It's probably like a good 2 full episodes, like including like side quests along the way, like going to her school to get the address of a friend of hers. Like it's drawn out, and they do this only for Clara to magically show up at their house, which irritated me in the moment. Like, we spent 2 episodes looking for her, and when they get home, she's already there. But the show took something that I immediately found off-putting, proved that it was done intentionally, and made it into an interesting plot point, which I respect. I appreciated that because my immediate reaction was essentially that they had a lot of explaining to do, both within the story and within the construction of the script, to justify spending 2 episodes looking for this girl and then just have her pop up right where they started. It made those 2 episodes feel like a waste of time. But the show understood this, and that very dynamic that I found unsatisfying was actually a pretty major plot point. And the show does that several times, sometimes to my liking and sometimes not. Like an example of where a scene or a moment would begin, and I'd be like, what is even going on right now? For them to then later have that moment make sense. I appreciate everything ultimately being explained, which did happen on this show for the most part. Anything that wasn't explained was intentionally left obscure for season 2. But if I had to lodge a complaint about this series, it would be that. That is my main issue. There were too many moments that took me out of the show, by making me go like, wait, that doesn't make sense. Or, what's going on here? Or I can't see what's going on here, for them to then make it make sense later. So even though I appreciate mostly everything ultimately making sense, that doesn't undo that sour feeling of wait, that doesn't make sense that happens several times throughout the course of the season. Taking the audience out of an episode and back to reality is, I think it's unwise pretty much all of the time, especially if the goal is to later go, see, we did have it all planned out. Like, that's not a goal worth achieving if the sacrifice is taking me out of the episode. But that's my little miniature rant. Moving on. To further complicate things for Juan, in addition to his daughter Clara being missing, he's having like visions and shit, right? And the visions are another example of something that frustratingly doesn't make sense, but is then later explained. So I can't say Juan has a bunch of visions that don't make sense, because they do explain the visions just like in like the last 10 minutes of the final episode. But I spent the majority of the season wondering what the fuck was going on with the visions. And I'm telling you, like, this show employs that strategy a lot, and I'm not a big fan of it. Juan's actual visions, they rarely make sense, and we spend the entire season being unable to make sense of what's happening in them, why they're happening, or why Juan goes kind of like catatonic when he has them. One thing I picked up on from the visions, and that we do have confirmed during the show, is that Juan is a war vet. They mentioned him coming back to Argentina on a boat from war, so of course I had to look that up. If you're new to this channel, you don't know this, but if you're not new, you know. If I see something, I'm like, what's that based on, or where does that come from? Like something that might have happened in real life. I gotta look it up. And in 1982, Argentina was involved in a 10-week war with the UK over the Falkland Islands, and I think that timeline adds up. That's likely where Juan served, and why, as we see in the show, he's a very good shot. Tano eventually figures out the cause for the toxic snow, and it's tied to something called the Van Allen Belt. The Van Allen radiation belt is a zone of energetic charged particles, most of which originate from solar wind, that are captured and held around a planet by that planet's magnetosphere. Tano says it's like a shield that protects the Earth from these particles, but now that the poles have stopped working, the magnetic poles, it causes the radioactive particles to fall down on them. Unfortunately for them, though, the toxic snow is not their only problem. Early on, I want to say in like episode 2 or 3, we get a brief glimpse of some sort of monster pushing a car off the side of a highway. And this was an interesting turn in the series for me too, though. Like up to that point, it just seemed like an apocalyptic survival show, like The Walking Dead or something like that. Like, all this toxic snow is killing people on contact. What are we going to do now? What is this world like? Introducing monsters took it from something that could have been grounded in science and mystery and firmly into the world of sci-fi. Which, again, no problem with that. Just an interesting change in dynamic. Episode 4 delivers our first good look at the monsters. They're giant, like I said, like beetle spider hybrids, but they're giant beetle-like creatures that spin webs like spiders and live in huge underground burrows. Juan and Tano encounter some soldiers that appear to be shooting at them, but they're actually shooting at these giant beetles. And the beetles eventually attack Juan and Tano, and Juan decides that'd be a great time for him to have one of his visions and to just kind of like black out. And they get rescued by a group who ends up hiding in a church. And the church group helps everyone, including the audience, understand that the bugs are part of an alien invasion. Now, with that previous sentence, I took like damn near a whole episode of talking in dimly lit places and condensed it into that 1 or 2 sentences. But the church talking scene went on way too long. Like, that was probably the only part of the series I would call boring. Episode 5 is where we learn about Juan's visions and time in the war, but it still remains unclear, even by the end of the season, what the connection is between the invasion and Juan's visions. Like, why is this invasion triggering these visions, and how does it relate to the invasion? We learn why he's having these visions, again, like I said, in like the last 10 minutes of the season, but we don't know how or if they're tied to the alien invasion. But the main focus of episode 5 is the group's experience at a mall. They decide they're going to try to go to Tano's island. Yeah, I would say Tano's island. He doesn't own an island. Tano's crib is on an island. But along the way, they pass what looks like a pretty bustling shopping mall. People are getting supplies. People are living in there. It's become something of a small city. Then out of nowhere, the toxic snow suddenly stops falling. While everyone's outside, like, joyfully appreciating not having to wear masks and bodysuits and shit, just being able to breathe the air, 3 people roll up, still suited, still masked, and just start opening fire on the crowd. Once that situation is under control, I really condensed a lot with once that situation is under control. We learned that these are just regular people who were previously at the mall. So like their motivations are unclear. Like, why would you do this? At this point, there's a small pile of unexplained and confusing behavior by characters within the show, like Clara's mysterious reappearance and strange behavior from one of the core friends, and Lucas. And it's starting to become clear that these things are tied together and not things that the show is doing a poor job of explaining. Like I said earlier, not a fan of this tactic. A lot of that shit felt like plot holes or sloppy storytelling and editing in the moment in real time. Learning that it was intentional and tied together, pretty fucking cool, not gonna lie. But again, it doesn't take away those earlier feelings of dissatisfaction watching these strange things happen in the moment that seemed like out of place or like mistakes. But in the finale, they lay out this plan to have Tano fix a radio that they will then take downtown, which is where the giant beetles are, to broadcast a message from atop a tall, abandoned building. And they're going to ram a train through a barricade. I don't know, this plan, like, it's a lot. But they're going to ram a train through this barricade that's blocking entry into downtown in order to achieve this. As they approach the collision in the train, they start singing a song called Cold Tomato Juice. It's both the name of the episode and, of course, I had to look it up, a 1970 Argentine rock classic by one of Argentina's first hard rock groups, Manal. Cool. Nice little cultural throwback for any Argentines out there watching. They successfully crash through the barricade. They get to the top of that tall building. They broadcast their message. Their message is received and heard by the people who didn't come on the mission, confirming that everything worked out. And there's a nice scene after this where the remaining living members of the group that were playing cards at the beginning when all the shit went down, they play the same card game again in one of the abandoned apartments within this building. And it was a nice little, bookend to have something like that in the final episode that mirrors the first one. Until someone gets stabbed and the person who did it jumps off the top of that building. But again, more strange and unexplainable behavior, right? Then, as if there wasn't enough strange and unexplainable behavior already, a creepy blue light is seen emanating from a stadium nearby. And Juan and one of the other characters decide to go investigate the blue light. And essentially all mysteries are solved when we learn that humans that have come into contact with the bugs are essentially now under mind control. And they seem to be slaves training for an impending war, which of course is not good because there's a whole shit ton of them. They're very easy to convert. And the people who are not mind-controlled slaves are dramatically outnumbered. And we also get a glimpse of the being that's behind this. We don't see much, but we see a massive hand that's like 20 fucking fingers on it. Pretty cool shot, creepy shit. Juan also reveals that his visions are essentially visions of the future because they're him remembering things that he claims that he has already experienced. He's like, I've lived this before. Those last two reveals, the mind control and Juan having lived all this before, explain all of the things that bothered me throughout the course of the season, and they do a damn good job of setting up a second season that I'm definitely going to watch. But look, I'm going to say it for a third and final time. Just because all that shit got explained and all that's great. Just because that got explained, it didn't make the experience of being taken out of the episodes any less enjoyable. This show came highly recommended by the Watch Podcast. It's a podcast I love. Recommended by their fan base. I get it. But for me, it was a fun show. It was a solid show. But it never really did anything special with its story or its characters that made it feel like anything more than your standard apocalyptic survival show. So in that respect, it works very well. But it's something that's special or unique that takes this genre and does something different and exciting and creative with it. I can't say this show did that. Like, it's interesting, but it plods along. The characters are decent, but at the same time, it's difficult to forge emotional connections with them because they spend most of the series in full bodysuits with their faces covered. You can't even tell who the fuck somebody is from time to time. And there's so many dimly lit scenes because, again, there's no electricity. So it's like there's roadblocks that the show and the comic that it's based on, presumably, have put in its own way that make it difficult to connect with right now. There's just too many pivotal moments that it's just tough to tell who's who. Where this shines is its setup for the second season. Like, I'm curious about Wan's military past. I'm curious about the snow stopping, the alien invaders and their goals, what the fuck the 20-fingered monster was. Like, all of those things that I'm interested in were the result of the show explaining a bunch of shit in like the last 10 to 15 minutes of the season. That's not really a good look. But if you're into a slow burn, apocalyptic sci-fi with some good world building and mystery, this show's definitely worth a watch. Even if you're not, it's worth a watch. But if you want like better pacing, memorable characters you can recognize throughout the course of the season, clear storytelling that's not, where the strategy's not be confusing and unclear and then reveal everything at the end, this show might test your patience a bit. Is it worth it in the end? I mean, I don't know. It was a fun experience. I think season 2 is probably going to be pretty great. I'm going to watch it. But if I'm being honest, against all of the responses I've seen about this show so far, I just don't think it did anything special to like really stand out in this genre. But let me know if you see it. If you've seen it, let me know what you think. Hit that like and subscribe if you want to see more. And I will see you guys next time. Peace.